right, so welcome everybody to the Journey Podcast, Navigating Pest Control in Business. I've got a very special guest here today, Mr. David King. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm actually tired because we've been working together all day.
We've had a full day, haven't we?
We have.
We've had a full day. So for those of you who've listened to previous episodes, we had David on. David, how long has it been?
Oh, gosh, over 3 years.
Wow, 3 years.
About 3 years. Not long after we started working together, so around 3 years.
3 years ago. So David, this is David's second time on our podcast. And David is an implementer with EOS. And so our listeners have certainly heard me mention EOS several times over the years and have probably heard you. And so, in the previous podcast. And so what we've done today is we had our quarterly session. And so I asked David to join us after this. I didn't know if we were going to be completely drained, but we still have some energy left. So that's a good thing. But, David, if you don't mind, just share with the audience real quick, kind of who you are, what do you do with the EOS, and then we'll kind of dive into what this day look like for us.
Yeah. So I'm a EOS implementer, which basically means I'm trained. I'm a franchisee of the EOS Worldwide organization. There are 900 of us around the world to do this. So the way I got into this was as the COO of a large CPA firm back in 2015. I read the Traction book. We implemented EOS in our business. I read those tools and, hey, let's do this. So we implemented it. So I ran a business on it for 5 years. And then 2020 is when I went through the training process, became an implementer. And now over the last 5 years, that's all I've been doing is working with companies as their coach, helping them implement these tools. So what I do every day, or, not every single day, but I have a number of clients that I work with, and I teach them the tools and then meet with them quarterly to just hold them accountable and running a great system, because getting all the right people in the right seats, running these tools, and whatever their goal is for their company, this tool will help them get there.
I love it. And I guess I knew this, but until you just said it, you started officially in 2020 during the worldwide pandemic.
Uh-huh.
So you probably saw, when the world changed, how important a lot of these tools and accountability and having a system and an intentional way of running a business. I mean, I think the whole world realized how important that was, right?
Yeah. So at the time, I was still in my seat as the integrator at the CPA firm. While I went through training in the last week of February of 2020. Then the world changed. So I'm about ready to start this new path. And it's like, oh goodness, how's this going to work out? So, two things. One, I stayed on that year at the CPA firm, and because again, we were making sure everything was working well, but we were a well-oiled machine running on the EOS, and I'm convinced we just blew right through the pandemic.
Yeah.
We were solving issues. We knew how to do it. We had the right people in the right seats. We knew how to solve issues, and it was a non-issue for us. The same thing happened with there was 8,000 or so companies running on EOS with an implementer at the time, and with the exception of the handful of companies that got, their business was totally shut down for whatever reason.
Right.
They were in the entertainment business and there weren't any concerts or whatever. Most of those companies sailed right through. It was just kind of, hey, we got a new issue. Let's solve it. Let's get, and let's move on. And so a lot of companies saw success because they knew how to deal with chaos when it came. And we saw that throughout the whole EOS community.
Wow. And like you, we started our business in the middle of the pandemic. July of 2020 is when we officially started, and pretty soon after we started EOS, got connected with you, and you've seen it. It's funny, you've seen our business, transform and grow from nothing, and you're like, why is this insurance guy getting into this whole new industry? You probably thought we were crazy, and you've seen sort of us evolve. And, it's interesting, I don't know how long companies typically stay with an implementer, and not necessarily going into today, like implementing versus self-implementing. I would encourage you, if you're listening to this podcast for the first time, you've heard EOS, go back and find the episode with David on it where he talks about EOS and explains what it is. But it is the Entrepreneurial Operating System. And so we've been operating under that back when our leadership team was bigger than our service team, like out in the field. Like we had more managers than we had customers almost. And so I think what's interesting is, I would say the last 2 quarters, we sort of hit pause as a company from, having you come in and implementing and leading our quarterly sessions for a various amount of reasons, right? Because we've been doing it for 3 years or whatever. And today was our first time really kind of getting back to it. And really it was like a reboot. Yeah.
Well, you were talking about how I've seen a lot. I was out there in the shop earlier during break, and I was looking at, for those of you that don't know, Rusty's got every year, there's this stuff on the wall that shows highlights of the year, and down at the bottom, you've got your revenue numbers.
Right.
So 2021, which was the year I started working with you, you hit 1.1 million or something like that. And this year you were 3.7. So I've seen the growth and to get to that point. And been through all of that. But once you get on EOS, you stay on EOS forever. It's the system that you use to run your business forever. You don't always use an implementer the whole time, because our job is to teach you how to do it,
Right.
so that you're out there and operating on your own, because we go and work, we move from company to company. But we had to do a reboot today because y'all have your leadership team looks different today. You've got some new people on the leadership team that weren't as familiar with it, hadn't gone through a lot of the training that I did on the early stages. And then y'all had just, it'd been almost a year since we had done a session together. So you just kind of wanted to reboot. And sometimes it's good to go back to the block and tackle and just get a refresh. So that's kind of what we did today is let's go back to some of the basics. Here's the 5 foundational tools. You got to be doing these well, and make sure y'all are understanding them and make sure you're doing them well, because if you're doing those well, then all the other stuff will work well.
Absolutely. And I think and I don't know if we're the anomaly or not, but I know when you're a growing company and we're trying to grow fast, but we're trying to do it the right way, to your point, there were 3 of us in the room today that were there for that initial session you did, but the other half of the room had never been there. And so I just kind of assume someone knows exactly how to run a level 10 meeting, what quarterly rock should look like, what all these things are. And you look up and you're like, man, we really need to go back to the basics. And this was perfect timing for us as a company, because somehow, and ultimately it falls on me, right? But somehow we had gotten away from doing a lot of the basics that we were doing really well. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean we were perfect in our execution of those things, but the cadence of doing a lot of the things we honestly got away from. And I don't know how it happened. It's just part of business. It's growing pains, I guess, right?
Human beings, and it's easy to get off track on stuff. So sometimes you need a coach to come in and go, hey guys, let's get back on track and start doing your things well. Again, you had a good year last year. You did a lot of good things, but if you want to master EOS and golf professionals have coaches, right? They still go, hey, it's a new season. Can I go back to my coach?
That's right.
And perfect my swing, or whatever the case. Y'all just, hey, we need to get back and focus on doing stuff. We've kind of got frayed. We've gotten off to our level 10's not great. Our accountability chart really isn't. So let's do a refresh. That's
Right.
all we were doing today is really kind of doing a checkup and making sure our tools are good. And some of them, you're going to have some work to do, good rocks over the next 90 days to take it to the next level.
And what I love about EOS, David, people say, well, hey, does EOS work? Or, hey, we tried it, but it didn't work. But that is a question I get a lot of time. Hey, do you like EOS, or does it work? And sort of my response is, well, does running your business on good business principles work? Well, yeah, I mean, right. And what it does, in my opinion, is it takes the different facets of running the businesses. And I'd love for you to talk maybe about the 6 functions, right? Right, is it 6 or 5, the spokes on the wheel, right? Like, it's just organizing them in a way that you can have a system the way you run your business, because it protects, we said it today, right? EOS protects the organization from visionaries like myself.
Right.
So why don't you touch on that? Just touch on maybe the 6 different functions and what that means and how it comes together. Because that was a really good refresher today.
And we call them the components, the 6 components, and just the origin. So Gino Wickman, the creator of EOS, was he was obsessing about what makes great companies, and they know what their issues are. They know how to solve them. The great companies are strong in 6 areas. So he built a model with 6 components to it. The vision component, everybody knows where we're going, how we're going to get there. Everybody in the company, not just the vision, right, not just the leadership team, all 24 people know, what that looks like. People component, you got to have great team members. You got to have great players on your team to get the work done. So what does a great team member for Prewett Pest Control look like? The data component, you got to look at a scorecard. How are we doing? You got to hold yourself accountable to certain measurables. Everybody needs to know what's being measured. So when those 3 components are strong, which is the top half of the model, it makes our issues clear. We know what we're supposed to be solving. And then we get great at issue solving. So the issues component is capturing issues and getting great at IDS, identify, discuss, solve. So we teach the teams to be disciplined at how to solve issues before they become problems. And so you're identifying those issues and then you're solving them before they become problems that are, derailing your business. The process component, all your processes simplified, documented, or all your core processes simplified, documented, followed by all. You want everybody in the business doing everything the right and best way, and you want to hold them accountable to doing that. And then the traction component is the foundational one at the bottom, and that's where we spend a lot of time today, which is that's quarterly priorities, which we call rocks, weekly level 10 meetings, quarterly meeting cadence, and that traction component is what holds everything together with the accountability piece. So those 6 components are what we stay focused on, and there's tools for each one to help you as an organization be strong in those. And so we went through those, and then just to on top of that, one other high level overview, there's 5 foundational tools to and there's 20 tools in the toolbox. There's a lot of tools in the toolbox. Or I say a lot, there's 20, but there's 5 foundational tools.
Which, by the way, I don't mean to interrupt, but just hearing you go over those today, and I've heard them 5, 10, 12 times, right? But you said it today, and it's almost like it took on a new meaning to me because I'm at a different stage in our business to where I internalized it differently than maybe when you first shared this 3 years ago.
Because you got to hear things 7 times.
We talked about that.
So the 5 foundational tools would be the VTO, or Vision Traction Organizer. That's who we are, what we do, where we're going. We're painting our future with that. This is where we're headed in 10 years, 3 years, 1 year. So we've got our roadmap, and then the accountability chart is everybody's role in building that future. So everybody in the company needs to know what their role is on this team. So I got to have all the positions that I need on my team, and then we've got them filled with the right people in there. The scorecard, that's the health of your organization. Weekly, you're looking at, are we doing everything we're supposed to do each week to get the business, where we want to go? And then the weekly level 10 meeting, and that's where we're holding ourselves accountable. Are you doing what you're supposed to do? You've got a role in building his future per that accountability chart. Are you doing those things? And that's an accountability meeting each week. And the rocks, that's how we're going to build that future. So we're doing things every quarter to move the business forward, so that 10 years from now, we're reaching that goal. And those 5 tools, you have to do those 5 really well. You have to master those 5 in order for EOS to work. And if you'll do those, then the magic starts happening.
And you know what's amazing, as you said that today, it really hit me. I'm like, why do we not have these 5 tools? Like, at least just what the 5 tools are, printed out and like laminated on my desk. So it can be a reminder, because a lot of the things, when I look back over the last 90 days or the last 12 months of like maybe where we've had some pain points or some frustrations, I'm like, wow, we've got some tools here. If we had sort of realigned and maybe put some of these tools in place, it would have alleviated some of this. And I think that's why this quarterly session and the quarterly cadence of working on the business as a leadership team is so important.
Mhm. Yeah, but and you don't beat yourself up about not having all the tools out there too, because you've done a fantastic job. Like your VTO sitting out there on the wall in the shop. You're sharing. You do a great job. The core values are plastered everywhere. Everybody knows. I mean, y'all have done a tremendous job with that piece of your business. Some of the other pieces we haven't. All the other tools, like I said, the level 10, you kind of we need to get better at that. But yeah, having those things in front of everybody. This is the blocking and tackling.
That's
That's
right.
what it is. Look, we can start getting fancy with all these schemes and things like that. But if we can just execute the blocking and tackling, that's the team that wins the game, right? So that's what we got to do.
Absolutely. And so I took some notes today. And so if you're watching this on YouTube right now, you can see I'm holding up our EOS binder that we bring to every quarterly session, our annual session as well. And I took some notes, and one of the things that that really stuck out to me, you may have even sort of started this in the first part of the day, but I think it's super insightful. Is just keep it simple. That's something I took away. Like somehow, I'm going to say, wait, like, people tend to overcomplicate things, right? And I think that was a really good reminder, like just keep it simple and do the few things that are that really make a difference in your business and do them well. Would you touch on that for us?
So do less better. One of the things I said, I've worked with, 4 dozen companies, 400 of these sessions under my belt. And one of the things I've learned over these 5 years is a common challenge that I see a lot of companies have is they make things too complex. And so I've kind of got a passion over the next 5 years of pushing teams to simplify life, simplify your business. And I showed the picture of the rocket engine, right? The SpaceX and how they've simplified to the point of they can mass produce, rocket engines so that they can, and so they're able to do what they're able to do because they simplified everything. And so everything we do in our business, we say it less is more. It's one of the 5 leadership abilities. It's the top one, simplification. It's less is more, less is more, less is more. Fewer steps in a process, fewer rocks for the quarter, et cetera, everything. And when you simplify your business, it kind of lifts the lid of that's holding it back, and
Right.
it makes it go faster and further and whatnot. And so, really challenging companies to take it to the next step, because some people are natural complexifiers, and that's okay. We need them. Compliance. You need somebody who's complex. I'm not your guy for that. I'm much more. A few bullet points is all I want, where somebody else needs to write a 2-page narrative. Well, there's a place for both.
Right.
But in your business, if you'll just pick the right things and do those well, do less, then it really takes your business to the next level. So one of the reasons companies are struggle so much with processes is they try to make it too hard.
Too hard.
We're not talking about an SOP manual that would make OSHA happy. We're just talking about a few simple steps to go treat a house.
And if we have the right people in place, that's really
Right.
all they need. Not all they need, but you see what I'm saying? Like if you got the good people and they have at least the core, what they need to do.
When the rules don't tell you what to do, if you have the right people that have the core values and they know what our purpose is, they'll make the right decision. So the rules aren't always going to tell you what to do. Get the basic rules. The 20% of the rules are going to cover 80% or 90% of the steps.
Right.
Sometimes the rules don't tell you what to do, but if you have the right people, because they have your core values and because they know what your core focus is and they know your why, they'll make the right decision. And if they don't, it's okay.
Right.
We'll fix it next time.
There you go.
Whatever. It's not the end of the world.
What was funny with me being a visionary, and I see the big picture and I've got ideas and all that stuff, right? I'm also a firm believer in having systems and processes. It goes back to the book, The E-Myth, by Michael Gerber. And I'm such a firm believer in processes and systems and intentionality of the way we run our business, the way we provide customer service and sales. Like, great customer service doesn't happen by accident. I mean, it has to be intentional. If you're going to be the Chick-fil-A and scale, it could happen if you're going to be a 3-person business and you're never going to grow and that's where you're going to be. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's a lot easier to provide that customer service, but to scale it and have customer service scaled, you have to be intentional. And I'm a believer in writing out those processes and procedures. And so I've almost got it in my mind, like, we have to have a written process and procedure for everything we do. Today was a really good reminder is, Rusty, you really need those core processes for the 80% of the things that matter in the business. And then if we have the right people in the seats, and that was the other takeaway on the accountability chart, if there's an ownership of a process, even if we don't have the process written down per se, if there's at least someone who owns that function of the business, whether it's at a high level or even at a lower level, then at least we know when something happens good or something happens bad. Like, we know who to go to troubleshoot that and maybe fix it or improve it or scale it out. I mean, so that was a big takeaway today for me, was not only the accountability chart of our leadership team, which is usually like what, marketing and sales, operations, HR, and finance. So yeah, we've been focusing the last 4 years on making sure we have the right people in those seats.
You haven't been focused on the next tier down.
No,
the lower tiers.
So touch on that. Yeah,
I mean,
please touch on
accountability
that.
chart. Every role that you have in the business needs to be represented on that accountability chart, and a person's name in that box. May not be a full-time position, but you need to, who's responsible for, making sure these particular things are done in the business. And when that issue comes up, like I said, well, we don't have a process for that. Well, that's so-and-so. She can handle it, or he can handle it, because that's his or her area. But all of the positions on the team need to be represented on that accountability chart. And then you put the names in the seats. Right. And so I think a lot of teams do just focus at the top tier, and they don't build it out far enough down where they're taking on, again, delegate and elevate. Well, when you build out the next tiers, I know who to delegate to, and I know the right person to delegate to. If I don't have it designated who I'm supposed to delegate to, I'm just going to keep the task myself instead of, hey, there's a better person suited to this.
And it's almost like maybe we got the cart before the horse more recently when we've been really thinking about scalable SOPs and procedures. We were really trying to focus on the procedure itself, as opposed to thinking of who has ownership of this role in the company. And then maybe they go and write the SOP there, right? And they, at least you go back to the accountability of that role, as opposed to, let's go write out 35 SOPs and then assign them to people. Let's get in the mindset of functioning, who has accountability and ownership of this function of the business. It could be who's in charge of our financials and our monthly reporting, who's in charge of making sure our fleet is maintained, whether it's in one location or 4 locations. I mean, that came up, right? We talked about that today.
Yeah. This happened to me recently in a session with a client. They were working on, okay, we need this process, that process, this process, that process. And finally, we kind of got down to the root. I said, is the root issue here, we're creating a process because we don't have the right person in the seat here. They're like, yeah. If you had you sitting in that seat, or someone who was capable of doing it, we wouldn't need that process. So oftentimes what I do see is, let's create a process. Let's create a checklist. Checklists are great. Processes are great. But if we're creating processes to mask the fact that we don't have the right people in the seat, then we're not moving ourselves forward. The solution is, you got to get the right people in the right seats. And then let's create the process. But if you're micromanaging through some process because we got to do all this, then we're really not moving ourselves forward. If that makes sense.
No, absolutely. And, when you hear that, and we talk about that all the time on this podcast and the culture of our company of, get the right people on the bus when they're in the right seat. When they're on the bus, let's make sure they're sitting in the right seat. And then I think, number one, we have to really understand that concept and wrap our brain around. But once we do, I think you get in there and like, well, how do you know once you get in there if someone's in the right seat? What are maybe some signs or something? You work at a lot of different companies. Like, where do you see, like, how do you recognize that or maybe you're like, man, this person belongs to be on the bus, but they're just sitting in the right seat.
Mhm.
What are some signs to know, like, when that's happening, and what do you do when you come across that? Because a lot of times you want to force them to sit there. Maybe they don't want to.
Again, this isn't hard. There's some numbers that they need to be hitting. Are they hitting the number? They got rocks that they need to be getting done every quarter. There you go. Are they getting their rocks done? Do they have joy coming in to do their job? Hey, I like this. I'm doing something I enjoy doing. I mean, that it's as simple as that in a way.
Yeah.
If they're not, okay, we're not hitting our numbers. We're always making when you start to see excuses, your radar should go up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Do I have the right person? Yeah. So those would be me. If you're hitting your numbers and your priorities every quarter are your rocks, and you're getting your to-dos done in those weekly level 10s, you got a right person in the right seat, and they're like, I love what I'm doing here. This is
Right.
And I'm trying to elevate, I'm trying to go further and or whatever. I just and I'm making the people around me better. But if I'm never getting my rocks done and my numbers are always off and I've always got an excuse for this and that and the other, then your radar kind of needs to go up and go,
Right.
What does this look like? Because what would it look like if a great person said this?
That's true. That's true. And I think too, it's as we systematize our business. Again, that's not taking the personal and the love and the care and the culture of what we're trying to do out of it. But I think it's, if we can really have systems in place to help us manage the business, it takes some of the emotion out of it. And look, this is a lot easier for me to say than it is in practice. But sometimes I hear, whether it's our company or others, are like, oh, I just need to be harder on so and so, or I just need to. I'm like, well, if there are clear expectations, if we have clear measurables or KPIs, position specific, then it'll tell us if they're doing their job correctly, if they're winning, if they're winning, right? So, I mean, in the last 12 months, I can name a person that we brought on the team who just wanted the feedback and knew, like, hey, am I doing a good job? Like, and this person was like, we owe it to them for them to have those measurables, because they don't know if they're doing a good job. If, let's say, I'm their manager and I'm not naturally good at giving that feedback, but if there's some clear measurables, or they know how to measure success in their role, right?
Yeah.
It's better for them. It's better for the company, everybody, right?
Yeah. What does success look like? They need to know. Again, if you go to sports, football or basketball, it's those athletes are measured by either points scored or blocks made or defense, whatever their specific position calls for. They know if they're being successful. Your business, okay, how are we doing on my routes, or how am I doing on my marketing,
Right.
my sales calls, or my lead? There's every role, though, even in accounting, every role needs to know what success looks like, and you hold people accountable to that. And I can't remember the original question that we got up with anybody, but that's, they need to know what the measure is, and that's an individual scorecard, and those individual scorecards and KPIs roll up to a leadership team scorecard. That's that foundational tool that we talked about.
Absolutely. And for the listeners, you've heard us talking about a lot of these things. You've heard us talk about a scorecard, and that's something our leadership team meets on weekly. We review our measurables. And one thing that we've really identified, I mean, not just today, but even prior to today, and it was reinforced, is we really have to have a scorecard for measurables in the different departments of our business, if you want to call it a department. So what does that mean? Like I may not need to see every scorecard measurable for every single aspect of maybe a service professional, and they're measurable for is their truck cleaned, and are they hitting this or their stop count or all these different things. But I promise you, at a service center level, someone needs to take ownership to know what those measurables are for that department. And even going into, like, let's say marketing, we've done a good job tracking our marketing and lead generation and stuff like that, but we've never really had measurables in a scorecard for our marketing department, right? We never had one specifically for our sales department. We track a lot of that stuff at a high level from a leadership team. But I think one of our takeaways, and I know is one of our rocks, we're going back and we're going to create those scorecards for each department. And we may start off with 2 measurables for that department. That's fine. But at least we have something to start measuring and build off.
You don't need a lot of measurables. Yeah. What's winning?
There you go.
What's winning? What is the 1 or 2 things you want them to do? And hold them accountable to that. So what gets measured gets done. And what we talked about this, what you must, if you expect something, you need to inspect it. So you need to track, you need to inspect what you're expecting your people to do.
Yeah.
So, and again, high accountable, high performing companies have great scorecards and measurables. Everybody knows. I know when I show up today, what I'm being measured on. I'm going to get my stuff done. And again, one of the things we really focus on in EOS, get the right people in the right seats. 80% of your issues are people issues. You got to have right people, which are people that love and have your core values. You got to have right seats. They're in a seat where they can be successful. They're in the right seat on that accountability chart where they can do those things, and you measure success by that scorecard.
I was gonna say, we don't always get it right. A lot of times we don't get it right when we're figuring that out, right? So, all right. To wrap it up, I know you've got a long drive back to Birmingham.
Yeah,
you're an Auburn guy. You're an Auburn alumni. You said your kids are what, 4th generation?
Yes, all 3 of my kids graduated from Auburn. They are 4th generation Auburn grads. My grandparents were here in the 30s. My parents were here in the 50s. I graduated in 88. And then my 3 kids graduated in, 19, 20, and 23.
Wow.
So
That's awesome. So you may have to find a way to wander your way back around Toomer's Corner, back through College Street.
Auburn anytime I can come. So love coming down here.
Well, that's great. And I was looking for a quote in my binder here, and I'm going to put you on the spot to see if you can remember what it was. But I want to kind of leave everybody with this, because this is a quote that David said. Now, I've kind of heard it in different ways, but I've always heard, inspect what you expect. So if you're a listener, if you've never heard that, then, inspect what you expect. So if I expect this from a team member or in a process, then I have to go inspect it. And so I've been saying it for years, inspect what you expect. But you added a second line to that today. Then I was like, I think I actually stopped the meeting and said, that's a writer downer, right?
Yeah.
What was that line?
So employees will respect what you inspect.
Say it again so the people in the back can hear.
So you inspect what you expect, and employees will respect what you inspect.
That's powerful.
So yeah, that's again, they know what's being measured, and they'll respect that.
And I think another place in the binder, and it's in here somewhere, and I'm not going to try to dig through and find it, but it said when you have I'm paraphrasing, but when you have a team that is built on trust and loyalty, they're okay with accountability. There was something along those lines of they don't feel like they're being micromanaged. They know there's a level of accountability when there's trust and loyalty.
Yeah.
Is that high trust? Isn't that right?
High trust teams don't mind having accountability towards being measured with scorecard. They're totally fine. Again, think of high performing athletes. They're all good with the measurables, the score. That's how they determine they're competitive. Whatever. High performing teams are good with being measured and having accountability. That doesn't mean you don't trust them. That means you're just validating. It's trust but verify, or whatever the word is you want to use. But a high trusting organization doesn't mean you don't verify or you don't measure. You do measure in those high trusting teams.
Absolutely. David, Appreciate your time today. It was an incredible day. Usually, mid-afternoon, somebody on the team starts getting a little, squirrels, and if Mike Ballard's listening, we know who I'm talking about. But we went over 5 o'clock today, and I have energy right now.
Yeah.
So that's really a testament to what you were able to help us facilitate and hopefully bring out of us what's already there. And so I thank you for your time. Thank you for staying around and spending time with our listeners today. Guys, if you want to hear more about EOS, David, share, how can they learn about EOS if they need to reach out to you or want to pick your brain, whatever, kind of walk the listeners through that.
Well, EOSworldwide.com. And then you could just type in David King, and you can find my website there. But again, EOSworldwide.com, and there's 900 implementers around the world. I'm connected to a lot of implementers around the country. If you're interested in getting connected to an implementer, my number is on that page there. You feel free to call me or shoot me an email. But that would be the best place, is just go to the website there, put my name in, and you'll find me.
Awesome. Well, hey, I appreciate it. To our listeners out there, thank you for joining us. Thank you for being on this journey with us. It's interesting documenting this of where we've been. And you just said, David, you were in our shop looking at we have our stories, and we have by years worth an overview of where we've been. And I tend to be such a perfectionist and want to do things, where I see the vision of this thing going. Sometimes you got to take a step back and reflect on the wins you've had. And we've had a lot of wins. We're very fortunate, a lot of good people that have helped us get where we are in this journey. So thank you for joining us today. David, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Safe travel back to Birmingham. And for our listeners, we will see you next time. Thanks for joining.